In the near future, scientists invent a device called timer, which is inserted into people's wrists and counts down the time until they meet their soulmate. Both parts of a couple must have the device for it to activate, and it will start beeping when they finally meet. The device immediately becomes a huge success, and soon most of society has one, but many people still refuse to get it because they don't want the choice to be made for them. In Los Angeles, Dennis Duna has a timer that hasn't started yet, which means her soulmate doesn't have one. After just a few months of dating her recent boyfriend, she convinces him to get a timer as well and takes him to the clinic. Everyone knows Una there because she brings every boyfriend of hers so she can be sure if they are the one before continuing with the relationship. The latest guy gets the timer too, and it immediately activates, revealing he has 2 years left to meet his soulmate. Una looks at her own timer, but it is still often breaks up with the man who is super excited about meeting the one right after he finishes college. Meanwhile, Una's stepsister Steph continues to have a bunch of one-night stands with random men whose timer will run out soon because her timer says she will meet her soulmate in 15 years. She often tells Una she should also enjoy life until the time comes to meet her soulmate, but Una refuses to be with anyone without a guarantee. One day, Una is at a grocery store when the cashier Mikey tries flirting with her. Una is flattered, but she can see his timer already has a date, which means he is not her soulmate. Mikey notices her timer too and points out they could still hook up because they have a long wait ahead of them, but Una turns him down. That night, the sisters go to their parents' house. Their younger brother Jesse is finally old enough to get his own timer, and a matchmaker has been invited to do the procedure at home. As soon as Jesse gets the implant, it beeps and shows he will meet his soulmate in 3 days. The whole family is excited and congratulates him, but Una can't help saying it is unfair. When she realizes she's killing the mood, she congratulates Jesse too and leaves without having dinner. Tired and frustrated with her situation, Una goes back to the grocery store, and after some hesitation, she asks Mikey to spend the night together. Mikey immediately agrees, and after telling his coworker to take his place, he leaves with Una in her car. It's an awkward trip because they don't really know each other, and Una starts to second-guess her idea when they make it to Mikey's place because the 4 roommates and the mess in the room make her extra aware of how young he is. She considers leaving, but Mikey insists it is fine before they share a kiss. It is a nice moment. However, when she sees his timer has only 4 months left, Una feels guilty and apologizes to Mikey before leaving. The next day, Una is surprised to discover her latest patient is Mikey, who found her because she's the only dentist with that surname. He really wants to get it on with her, so he explains he is a musician in a band and not just a cashier. Mikey also says that the timer shows you the end game, but life is about detours. However, Una is still not interested and thinks getting naughty with him would be like cheating on his future soulmate. In the evening, Una goes on a blind date, but the guy is incredibly boring and only talks when answering her questions. Una decides to cut the date short and goes to the club where Steph works as a bartender. To her surprise, Mikey's band is playing there, and seeing him perform awakens something in Una. They end up making eye contact and creating so much tension that after the gig is over, Una goes to Mikey's home to finally do the dirty. When they are about to start, they hear Mikey's roommates arrive and make lots of noise. So Mikey goes out and asks them to shut up, explaining how amazing Una is and how this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Una hears all this and is extremely flattered. Afterward, Mikey puts on some music to cover their noises and gets down to business with her. The next day, Steph is at her day job as a receptionist when a man called Dan comes in. She finds him very handsome and starts flirting with him, but she immediately drops him when she notices he doesn't have a timer. Later at home, Steph learns that Una finally had a fling and congratulates her, but also advises her not to meet with Mikey again because it won't end well. Sometime later, Una's parents are very excited because today is the day Jesse's timer reaches 0, meaning he should be meeting his soulmate. However, he spends his whole day at school normally without getting any reaction. When Jesse returns home, the cleaning lady Luz introduces them to her husband and her daughter Soledad, whose timer suddenly reaches 0. So does Jesse's, meaning they are soulmates. While the teenagers awkwardly stare at each other, Jesse's mother gets very excited and wants to start planning all sorts of things, but Luz feels uncomfortable and immediately leaves with her family. In the evening, Una is leaving her office when she is suddenly startled from behind and ends up hitting the attacker. It turns out to be Mikey, who insists he wants to spend more time with her, and she agrees to take him to her house. After another wonderful night together, Una can't deny how much she likes Mikey, and they start spending lots of time together outside the bedroom. Una even befriends Mikey's roommates, finding them more fun than she expected. One day Una tells Mikey that her father is a music producer, but she hasn't seen him since the divorce. Mikey realizes she is the daughter of a very important person in the industry and says it makes their clapping even more amazing. Meanwhile, Steph's boss yells at her for not answering the phone, but luckily Dan shows up and makes up a story as a cover. After the boss leaves, Dan shows clear interest in Steph, who doesn't like him back. However, she thinks he may be good for Una, so she tells him to visit her at the bar in the evening. Later Steph invites Una too, pointing out she hasn't been out very much lately. Una feels bad but still doesn't tell her about Mikey because she knows Steph would judge her for it. That night, Una chooses to hang out with Mikey, so Dan ends up chatting with Steph. They quickly hit off and spend most of the night together, sharing more things about their lives. Dan explains his wife died 3 years ago and believes she was the one, so he has no interest in getting the timer. By the end of the night Steph realizes she is getting a crush on the guy. When Steph returns home, she still gets angry with Una for standing her up. At that moment she sees Mikey in Una's room and realizes they have been dating in secret. An argument immediately ensues about Mikey's timer and the fact a soulmate will show up for him soon, so Mikey interrupts them and reveals his timer is fake. It's just a sticker that he removes as he explains he only wanted not to be made fun of over a trend, and he admits he doesn't believe timers truly work. Una is shocked and hurt over the lie, so she kicks Mikey out. Days start to pass and Una can't stop thinking about Mikey. In fact, she realizes that thanks to the fact they got together naturally, Una was able to be herself and enjoy their dates without worrying about legitimacy or the future. Eventually she decides to get in contact with him again and they talk things out, so they start dating again. When it is time for Thanksgiving, Una decides to bring Mikey as her date. Luz and her family are also there with some dishes from their land, hoping to bring both families together. The teenagers still feel awkward, but Mikey knows how to speak Spanish so he acts as a translator between both groups. Una's parents have lots of questions for Mikey but Una answers them instead, not letting him speak because she is worried anything he says will be used to judge them. After dinner, Una's mother tells her that she likes Mikey just fine, but she is worried about the potential heartbreak when Una's soulmate finally shows up. In the meantime, Dan and Steph begin meeting in secret too and start a very casual relationship. Sometime later, Mikey tells Una that he loves her, causing her to panic and run away. Needing some serious advice, Una decides to visit her biological father Rick and Steph goes too as support. At first the situation is very awkward, so Una cuts the tension by sharing a disc with Mikey's music for him to consider. Then she asks him why he never got a timer, but to her shock, Rick reveals he does have one. This means her mom lied when she claimed they got a divorce because Rick wouldn't get a timer. Rick still has some time left before meeting his soulmate, but he would rather enjoy life and real emotions. When the sisters are about to leave, they discover Rick's much younger girlfriend got her own timer removed because she loves Rick and her feelings are more real than whatever the timer says. Inspired by this, the sisters rush to the clinic to get their timers removed so they can live their days more spontaneously. The employees warn them that if the device is removed once, they can't replant it again, so this is the last chance of finding the one. Steph doesn't care and immediately gets hers removed, feeling relief. However, when Una's turn comes, she hesitates, and at that second her timer starts beeping to indicate her soulmate finally got his own. There are only 5 hours left for the meeting and Una decides to keep her timer claiming it's just curiosity, but Steph gets mad at her and feels betrayed. Later the sisters go to their parents' home to celebrate their shared birthday. While their parents mingle, Jesse approaches Soledad and reveals he has learned a bit of Spanish for her. Without the pressure of their families, the teens manage to finally bond on their own terms. Mikey has been invited to and works as a translator between Luz and Una's mother, who decide to keep their relationship as boss and employee and let the teens work things out in private. Meanwhile, Steph is happily hanging out with Dan, who is also invited. At that moment, Una bumps into him and their timers go off, indicating they are soulmates. Steph immediately gets upset and rushes to the kitchen while an upset Mikey leaves the party. Dan goes after Steph and tries to comfort her, only to be interrupted by Una. Another argument ensues because Steph feels like she is losing the best thing that happened to her, accusing Una of always taking things from her. However, Una says Steph is her best friend and nothing in her life is worth losing her, not even her soulmate. Then Una leaves and Dan tells Steph he only got the timer for her. He doesn't care about Una, he likes Steph. The next day, Una goes to see Mikey and reveals she got her timer removed because she wants to be with him. Mikey is touched by the gesture but turns her down, saying he can tell she isn't in love with him and he is just something safe. Devastated, Una leaves and visits Steph next. After a heartful talk the sisters finally reconcile. Sometime later, Una goes out for a run and bumps into Dan, so they have a very awkward conversation. They can tell they have some things in common, but it's too late now and they go their separate ways.